Hi, it's Mike DelSignore here. In today's video, I want to talk about what happens if you're charged with OUI and your case is going to be heard in Barnstable District Court. My name is Mike DelSignore. I handle OUIs all over Massachusetts, and I've done a lot of work out of Barnstable Court in particular. And I want to go over sort of what you need to look for, what you need to consider when you determine whether to resolve the case or whether to set it down for trial. So I want to give you sort of three tips that I think clients should keep in mind. First of all, number one, if you took a breath test, don't assume the case can't be won, because we've won many cases over the years with breath test evidence. So I handle OUI cases throughout the state of Massachusetts. A lot of the work is in Barnstable County, and in particular, with a breath test case, you need to know sort of the science of how these machines work. I've traveled throughout the country, I've written on OUI defense, and I've really studied the breath test to help my clients, because frankly, I think in the legal profession, especially lawyers that do OUI, there's not too many attorneys that really understand how this machine actually works when you get down to it. So I think that's a real gap in legal services, and what I want to provide to my clients is be able to show them that, if you want to fight the case, challenge the breath test, this is how the machine works. This is how I have to do it. These are the pros and the cons of fighting the case with the breath test. Sometimes that may require hiring an expert. Sometimes it may require doing a motion to exclude the breath test from evidence. So there are a lot of legal reasons why the breath test may not come into evidence in your case. For example, officers must comply with an observation period prior to the test being admitted. I like to get the video because I think that shows gaps in observations. When you see the video, you get to see what everyone did, how it was done, and there's often defenses that you wouldn't get had there not been any video, just a police report. Number two, these machines, there's been problems with them for basically the last 6-7 years. There's been issues with the Office of Alcohol Testing, their compliance with certain rules and regulations, the annual certification, and all these things have come to light that these machines spit out results in ways we don't even understand. For example, you got a breath test result. Let's say it's 0.15. You got one reading. It should say 0, 0.15, ear blank. Then it's a calibration, so that'll say 0.08. So a lot of people confuse the calibration with their test. That might be 0.08, 0.078. It should be close to 0.08. And then there'll be another ear blank, another 0, and then your test, a 0. And that's sort of the breath test sequence. But what we've learned, and I've talked to an expert in Washington State on this, is the breath test actually gives 4 readings. So you see 0.15, there's data that indicates what the reading was when your test was sort of being evaluated by the machine, sort of like a curve, and they give you sort of the average, but we can find out, well, what was it when you first started blowing into the machine? And this is what they call the curve data. So that's number one. Breath test can be challenged. Don't assume you can't win your case. If you did take a breath test, get your license back in 30 days. So that's the benefit of taking it. You can get back on the road while the case is being challenged and fought in court. Next, people rush into a continuance without a finding. I think that's the second mistake I see commonly is people assume that a continuance without a finding, they hear it's not a conviction, it's going to be dismissed, and they wrongly believe that it's as if the case is over, but that's not the case. In fact, a continuance without a finding is an admission to OUI. So it's almost the same as if it's a guilty, it's a conviction. If you ever get another OUI, it'll count as a second offense. So don't think that a continuance without a finding is sort of this great resolution to the case. You can always get a continuance without a finding, basically right up to the trial date. And if you go to trial and lose, you're generally not much worse off. You're going to get a guilty in most courts, and pay the same fines and fees. So don't rush into a plea. There's things that can be done in terms of challenging the evidence, doing a motion, hearing the officer testify. So one of the things I like to do is do a motion to suppress, where I get the officer on the stand and it kind of previews the case. And we learn a lot. Sometimes we win cases on motions. We get stops knocked out or statements knocked out. But even in those cases where we don't prevail, we learn a lot that helps us for trial. So don't rush into the case without finding out what your defenses are, really determining if you can win this case, and don't basically assume that you need to resolve it and rush into a plea. And the third thing I see people do, mistakes people make when they have OUI cases is They assume that these tests that the police report, just because the officer says you failed field tests, what's written in the report is the final word. We can call witnesses, we can present our version, we can show that these field tests aren't accurate and reliable. And when you do these things, a lot of these cases end in not guilty verdicts. So if you have questions, feel free to call me. My passion is helping people charged with OUI offenses in Barnstable and all over Massachusetts. You can call, text anytime. 781-686-5924. It's never too early, too late to call. Michael DelSignore, I'm here to help you.